Well, staying with big political events, China is set to kick off a historic National Party Congress this weekend. The country's struggling economy is sure to be a key focus in the face of President Xi Jinping's ongoing zero COVID policy. Data today shows consumer prices in September rose at the fastest pace they've gone since April of 2020. Certainly hard to overstate the importance of the event. The National Congress happens only once every 5 years. It outlines the broad priorities for the nation. More importantly, there are suggestions the overall mission statement will pivot from a long-held focus on economic growth to security. The future structure of the ruling party will also be determined. China watchers eagerly awaiting details on the next premier. He's traditionally part of the all-important standing committee or Politburo and the nation's second most powerful man. The big takeaway, President Xi is poised to win a third term, making him the most powerful leader of China since Mao Zedong. Let's dive deeper into this big kickoff with Nargiza Salidjanova. She's Rhodium Group China Practice Director. Nargiza, you have put out this very interesting annual report, the China Pathfinder, that really takes a closer look at where China's economy is right now. All eyes are going to be on that third term, or at least the president securing that third term. What is that likely to mean in terms of how the economic policy shifts for China?
That's right. As you said, the 20th Party Congress means everyone is trying to really define what is the future of China's economic policy. And what the China Pathfinder project, which we have worked on in partnership with the Atlantic Council, shows us is that China's path to reform has really stagnated. Not enough to undo some good progress that they've done since their WTO accession, but in areas from openness to investment to market competitiveness, we see a pause or in some cases a rollback. And as we know, the role of the state has been surging in many regards in every part of the economy and society. We have seen parties' intrusion increasing, which really sends a warning and a caution to foreign investors, to domestic companies. What to expect coming out of the party's Congress is on everyone's mind.
So it's worth sort of looking back to where we were a year ago. China was growing at an annualized rate of 8%. Now you've got the World Bank forecasting 2.8% growth. Many major banks have come out and said 3% in 2022. What is the pivot that's likely to come out of this party Congress, or is there one, given that, number one, the president has doubled down on the zero COVID policy, but number two, I mean, we have really started to see a reckoning in the real estate sector.
And the real estate sector is, I think, the core issue for us to focus on, right? Delivering, up to 25% of China's economic growth. And there's no substitution for that. The government has not been really able to set up new drivers of growth, which will take China forward and able to deliver the same kind of growth that China and observers have been able to enjoy. There has not been a proper resetting, even with all the downgrades, and we've seen them coming down and down and down through the entire year. A couple of important things to watch out for, right? And this is going to be true for both China's domestic audience and external audiences. What happens with zero COVID? Nothing has disrupted China's economy as much going to the core of China's society as zero COVID policy. And it's really unlikely that there's going to be a real kind of aggressive shift unveiled at the Party Congress. That's really the time to sort of reset and retrench. But looking forward, what happens? It's going to be a much better situation for China if there is a stronger signal that the policy is going to be stopped, rather than kind of a fudging and slurring its way through a kind of gradually declining through that. Another really important consideration to watch out for is the new crop of leaders being appointed into key positions. Every appointment is going to be viewed through the lens of whether it points to further consolidation of power by Xi Jinping and a further retrenchment, or will technocrats be at the reins once again and be allowed to put in place more policies which stabilize China's growth, which put it on a more sustainable path and push reform forward. Another really important thing to pay attention to is what happens with a greater unveiling or a greater emphasis on what common prosperity actually means. As we know, that's an important policy that Xi Jinping has put his personal imprimatur on. And Chinese officials have been at pains to say that there's not going to be a massive redistribution, but it isn't really clear how common prosperity is going to play out.
Nargiza, I'm thinking back to, just how much sort of the message from the top down has shifted over the last 5 years since this last party Congress. We were talking about President Xi talking about quality growth, not growth at all costs, also talking about reining in debt. It feels like he sort of put that aside. Security, certainly a bigger focus, at least that's the expectation moving into this. You think President Xi is willing to put security front and center at the expense of a slowdown in the economy? Because that has sort of moved hand in hand in terms of foreign investments coming in, companies saying rethinking their presence in China. I mean, where's the priority here, you think, for the next 5 years?
So we have to be careful here, sort of not to overgeneralize, right? Like all governments and all politicians, Chinese officials are able to have multiple levers that they pull, depending on need and depending on their core priorities. But it is certainly true that political considerations and in many cases security considerations have been overriding a lot of the economic priorities in recent years. We've seen this manifested in China's relationship with some of its external partners. For example, the way that the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment with the EU was really undermined by the decisions of Chinese policymakers and their emphasis on policies which the EU officials just found intolerable.
What does this ultimately mean for companies that are still doing business in China? Investors, I mean, you point out in your report itself, there's increasing questions about whether China is investable.
Right. I think regardless of what happens at the 20th Party Congress, China faces a prolonged period of weaker growth. And this is because even if Chinese officials really decide to sort of go all in on a new aggressive reform package, tangible structural changes will take years to be realized.
Nargiza Salidjanova, Rhodium Group China Practice Director, really appreciate your time today.